Hello Makeup Void, I'm Trend and welcome back to my channel. Actually, this may be your first video here because everybody loves a good eyeshadow palette ranking. I have no idea how many palettes I have in front of me. I have no idea, but you'll see in the title of this video how many palettes I've tried this year, so you know I don't. But we're gonna do a ranking all of them. It's arbitrary, it's going off vibes, it is going off just what I was feeling in the moment as I was sitting down on the floor laying all these palettes out. I was like moving stuff around, I was like, this is obvious, this is not so obvious. I was like, is this really number one? I'm surprised by number one. You'll be surprised by number one. Let's go ahead, give this video a like, a dislike, subscribe to my channel for videos on Sundays and Tuesdays. Let's go ahead and get rolling. I've said this in the intro, but I do have eyeshadow looks for every single one of these palettes. I have swatches for a lot of these palettes. Not every single one because I'm lazy and didn't feel like swatching all these eyeshadow palettes. But I at least have eye looks. So I mentioned it in a lot of videos where I planned this project to where at the end of the year I like to do just one more look with each of these palettes, which is gonna, if I ever get on PR lists, like I'm toast. I'm just toast. Like that's not gonna happen. But for now, because only one of these palettes were gifted to me, I spent so much money this year on eyeshadow palettes. It's absurd. So only one of these palettes were gifted to me. One of these were decluttered. I have a lot of thoughts. So let's start off with the lowest palette, which I have decluttered. It is the DD Signature. I'm going to scoochie a little bit off to the side. Okay, so the first palette that's the bottom of this ranking is the DD Signature Taste of Guava palette. It was the first palette I bought this year. It came broken. I reached out to the brand and I was like, hey, just letting you know, the MAC green shade in this palette came broken. I included a picture and they ghosted me. I didn't reach out to them ever again. I didn't reach out to them on Instagram. I didn't do anything like that. It just left a very bitter taste in my mouth because if you have a customer service line, like respond to your customer service line. And it left a bitter taste in my mouth. I know, like, I watch a lot of YouTubers that get PR from DD Signature. They say that their quality has evolved over the year. So I'm not writing off the brand entirely, but being the first palette I tried this year and being such a bust was a little disappointing. Just a little bit. But I did declutter that palette because of the green to pink duochrome in that palette, because I was wearing Patron from Fantasy Cosmetica and a coworker was like, OMG, I have to have this palette or have to have that eyeshadow. And so she forgot to place her Fantasy Cosmetica order right away like she said she would. She just placed it a few days ago. But I was looking at Taste of Guava and I was like, you know what? That shadow that she wants in Patron is so similar to what's in DD Signature that I just ended up giving her that palette for a cup of coffee. I was just like, just buy me coffee, you can have this palette. So I ended up decluttering that palette. I have no regrets. The mattes in there were so subpar. Like the pink was fine. The green, because it came broken, I really can't comment on it. I'm not the best at depotting or repressing eyeshadow, so I don't know what happened to that. The shimmers were fine, but that pink to green duochrome was so pretty. It was so pretty, but I have Patron from Fantasy Cosmetica and my coworker really liked it, so I just ended up decluttering it. Next palette is the Tarte Tartelette palette. Now, Tarte does amazing mattes. Amazing mattes. If you just want a solid all matte palette, stop here, press pause, go to Ulta, and pick up this palette. Actually, it's like Black Friday season, so you can probably get it on discount on Tarte's website. Anyways, this is a very beautiful neutral palette. Though, if you know my vibe, if you know my channel, I love a good chunky glitter. Or not necessarily glitter, but I like a good chunky flaky one and done eyeshadow. And because this palette is all mattes, I don't get that from this. This is ranking low just because of that. I did an eyeshadow palette collection video in June and my mom watched that video and she's like, can I have this palette? And I was like, you'll get it eventually. So now I'm going to reach out to my mom and I was like, hey, do you still want this? So I'm going to give this to her for like Christmas. So this is going to be decluttered. Has nothing to do with the formula. I think the formula is fantastic. If you just want a standard all matte palette, stop here. You won't be disappointed. But for me, it's just not usable in my collection. It really serves no purpose, which is a bummer because the quality is really good. And that was the one palette that was gifted to me this year. My mother-in-law felt like she had to buy 3 of those palettes, and then she afterwards was like, why the fluff did I do that? Do you want one? I was like, sure, I'll take it. Sure, why not? So I ended up taking it from her. I don't regret taking that palette from her. I'm glad I got to revisit the Tarte formula because the mattes really are that good. Like, if you don't want to shop indie and you just like want an all matte palette, like, that's phenomenal. A palette that I got at the very beginning of this year, and I was like, you know what? This is going to be my new favorite brand. I just know it. And it's not because it's ranking so low. This is the Adept Cyber Choir palette. Now, Adept does shimmers phenomenally. They're creamy. They're almost too creamy. You really have to use your fingers with this formula because picking them up on a brush is so challenging. It is so hard. But these mattes are terrible. Absolutely freaking terrible. If you're going to include mattes in a palette, they need to be at least good. And these mattes are just not good. I used them in my look. I just could not make them work. Like this purple, this beautiful purple, showed up as nothing. Absolutely nothing. And I was packing it on. It was showing up as nothing. So I went in, I think I had to use the black. I think I went in with the red and lower lash line. I should have the pictures up as I do this. I don't feel like it. So the shimmers, these top 2 rows, so good. But if you're going to include mattes in a palette, they have to at least be good. And these mattes just ain't it. So I don't regret buying this palette because the shimmer's all that good, and since I am a more shimmer heavy eyeshadow girly, I can kind of, you know what, it's fine. I can get behind it. I'm not going to declutter this palette because I don't like the mattes, but for me, it's again, like, you need to have good mattes, especially for an indie brand, and this just doesn't do it. Where am I going to put all these palettes? I'm going to stack them on top of my phone. This next palette is just so disappointing. I was so disappointed in it, and I knew that buying the palette. I did this for you. I did this for science. And I'm ranking it so low, even though this is my favorite indie brand. I can't help it. This is the Fancy Cosmetica Enchanted Autumn palette. This is the collab with Makeup Just for Fun. Can we take a look at the packaging? Absolutely freaking beautiful packaging. Fancy Cosmetica does like the best packaging in my opinion. But the reason why this is ranking so low is just like, this is not good Fancy Cosmetica formula. It's a good formula, but it's not Fancy Cosmetica level formula that I'm expecting from the brand, which is really disappointing. Also, you can do a one and done eyeshadow look with this palette. You definitely can, or like when I say one and done, I mean like 2 mattes or like 1 matte, 1 shimmer, like one and done. You can definitely do that. The palette is organized where you can do 6 one and done looks with it and they'd be very pretty, but I'm so underwhelmed. I was so underwhelmed. I just want to be a Fancy Cosmetica collector. I acknowledge that. I don't care. I want to be that reference. But this is just so disappointing. And it's too grungy. It's just, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. But I would never declutter it because it's Fancy Cosmetica. My second palette of 2024 is the Adapt Element 115 palette. I bought this palette because my husband is obsessed with aliens. He's like always obsessed with aliens, but like lately he's just been going off the deep end. And so I was like, let's buy Element 115 from Adept. Let's do that. And this is ranking higher than Cyber Choir because the mattes in here are better. They're a little bit better. They're usable. I hit pan in the navy shade back when I had navy and purple hair color, and so I used the navy in my brows, so that's how I hit pan in it. I do like these 2 rainbow shades. You can kind of get the rainbow effect on the eyes. You can kind of do that. It's really hard, but if you just do like a swipe and a pat, you can kind of make it work. But then I put a wing on top of it and you lose the rainbow effect. So Again, Adept has an amazing formula when it comes to their shimmers. You can't beat that. But again, if you're going to put mattes in a palette, they have to be at least good. And these just don't do it for me. So I'm sorry, Adept. I really thought that Adept was going to be my new favorite brand this year. I really did. When I first bought those two palettes, I was like, yes, I'm going to buy everything from Adept this year. And it just didn't end up being the case. It just didn't. It makes me really sad because the shimmers are so good, but like you have to have better mattes if you're going to include mattes. Next, I bought it because it was on sale. Blend Bunny Longing palette. This is a really good palette, y'all. This is really good. Like, I don't think you need to buy every Blend Bunny palette, but I do think everyone should have one Blend Bunny palette in their collection. At least one. Just pick one that screams your color story. They did a lot of collabs this year. Maybe pick a palette from your favorite collab person. Maybe do that. I bought this palette because it was on sale in October, and I said fluff everything, and I bought it. This is good formula. It's really good. I don't think I ever touched like this murky olive green row. I don't think I ever did. But you try one Blend Bunny matte and you've tried them all. They're pigmented, they're Blend Bunny, they're blendable, they're good. The shimmers are not one and done for me. I want more from these shimmers. And I did have an interview this week, and fingers crossed I get the job. Fingers crossed. And if I get the job, I will do a tutorial with the look because I use this palette to do that look, to do that tutorial, whatever. I use this palette for that interview look. So you might see this again on my channel in the next few weeks if I get the job. Because I want to show off. Let me boost my ego, because it was only my makeup that got me the job. It was just my makeup. It had nothing to do with my interview performance. It was only that. And now recalling back to that interview, I derailed. Which is a problem I have in a lot of heavy conversations, is I just derail and like go off. My bad. Next palette, when I got it, I said that I was going to rank pretty high because it's a ColourPop x Pokemon Palette Town palette. I said that when I bought this palette I was going to rank it really high in my end of the year ranking because it's Pokemon. Pokemon is my favorite franchise. Years and years ago I told myself if ColourPop ever did a collab with Pokemon, I never thought it was going to happen because Nintendo is very... I think this is more aligned with Game Freak. Game Freak is more okay with like random ass collabs. But Nintendo is very much not. Nintendo is very selective. So I thought this was never going to happen. I should show you the inside of the palette. I really like, this is, okay, it's not the only ColourPop palette I bought this year. It's the only ColourPop palette I kept. An honorable mention should have been the Cloud9 palette from, hold on. I did purchase the ColourPop Cloud9 palette. I opened it. I think I maybe used it once and then I returned it and then bought the DD Signature Taste of Guava palette because I didn't want to keep it. So technically this is the second ColourPop palette I bought this year, and I really don't regret buying this palette because I decluttered all of my rainbow palettes, and so now this is my only rainbow palette. So I need to keep it. Okay, so this palette has pressed glitters in it, but they don't really come across as glitters on the eyes. If you're gonna put a pressed glitter in the palette, which pressed glitters is a very polarizing conversation. I don't mind pressed glitters in palettes, but if I know that, if I'm like eyeing a palette and I know that going in, I'm gonna skip on it. Like the Huda Beauty Icy Nude palette had my heart, and then I saw there was pressed glitter and I was like, no, I'm good. No, I'm good. But I don't think I knew there's pressed glitters into this palette going into it. So the yellow in here is a pressed glitter. So pressed glitter, pressed glitter, pressed glitter. I don't know if there's any other pressed glitters. Or is, no. Yeah, I think those are, so there's 3 pressed glitters in this palette. They don't come across as glitters in the eyes, and it's just like if you're gonna do a pressed glitter, like just make it a glitter. So you definitely need a glitter glue. They're not soft, they don't set on their own. You definitely need some help with it. What I don't like about rainbow palettes, unless it's Blind Bunny, because Blind Bunny does gradients so well, it's just that with normal normal rainbow palettes, you have to pick and choose what's the deepest shade in the palette. So you have this as a deep shade, you have this as a deep shade, but it's kind of like a dirty red to brown duochrome, so I don't know how that's going to work as a deepening up shade, but it's a beautiful rainbow palette. I bought this because it was Pokemon. If it was just like ColourPop's coming out with a new rainbow palette, I would have skipped on it, but it's Pokemon and I love it. So, but I can't rank it higher because I don't like ColourPop's formula. I just don't. Like, I see a lot of the palettes that have come out this year and I'm like, ooh, should I pick it up? And I'm like, girl, you don't like their formula. If you buy it, it's going to rank low in your ranking, so why buy it to begin with? So that's what stopped me from buying a lot of ColourPop this year, is because of last year's palette rankings. Like, all of my ColourPop palettes, except for maybe one, ranked towards the very bottom. So it's not the formula. I'm so torn on where to put the Pokemon palette because I love Pokemon. I love the entire collection. There was only, like, of everything I tried in the collection, there was only one, like, sort of bust, but generally, I liked everything. Next, we have Fantasy Cosmetica Wizard palette. I know this is my favorite brand, and, like, all of their palettes are ranking really low. This is still my favorite brand. So this is the Wizard palette. It came out last year. I bought it this year because I want to collect all Fantasy Cosmetica. I love this quad right here and this pop. I love, like, these 5 shadows. I could care less about these bottom shadows right here because they're too dark. I just like a light and fresh look. Light, fresh, one and done eyeshadows. You have a one and done combo right here. You can kind of do like a one and done like with here and then this shadow. Generally, I don't like super light shadows because they don't show up on my skin tone, even though I'm really pale. I can't get like pastels to pop on my eyes, which is incredibly frustrating. But generally I can, but because these are so pigmented, they're so beautiful, they're so easy, they're so nice. The reason why I'm ranking this pretty low is for the holographic shade. It's sort of like my reoccurring complaint. If you're going to put a shadow in a palette that's like different, special, unique, it needs to be good. And this is just a mediocre holographic shadow. I don't like holographic shadows to begin with because you don't get the, like, if you're up close, you'll see the holographic. If you pop back out, down, you have no idea what's on my eyes. You just think it's a dark navy blue. So I just wish it was a little bit more special, but overall, it's a good palette. If you know Fantasy Cosmetica, if you know the formula, you're going to enjoy it. I just have to rank this low because the holographic shadow just isn't that good. And honestly, it's not my favorite color story from the brand. It's just not. They've steered away from their D&D character palette themes, and it really disappoints me because it's like I still want the cleric palette. Fantasy Cosmetica, give me the cleric palette. I will buy it the second it launches. Actually, I buy like nearly every Fantasy Cosmetica's palette the second it launches. Nearly everyone. Just how it rolls. Next palette is ranking towards the bottom. We're kind of in the middle at this point. Bottom, middle, I don't know. The reason why this palette is ranking where it is because, well, it's a blah blah blah. What are you? Bella Butte bar. I'm so bad at this video. I'm so bad. This is why I'm not getting on anyone's PR list. It's because I suck. Alright, this is the Bella Butte bar ultraviolet palette with Deandra and Nicole. I didn't buy this palette when it launched. I bought it like a month ago. And the reason why I didn't buy it was because, like, oh, I have the Menagerie Flight Club palette. I don't need another purple in my collection. And you know what? I'm over Menagerie. I just don't care for their formula anymore, and the staining is real. The staining is also very real in this palette. Don't get me wrong, the staining is very real, especially with this shadow right here. Oh my goodness, the staining is real. But it's a good palette. This was my first time trying Bella Butte's bar mattes, and the mattes are impeccable. The reason why this palette is ranking where it is because it's an all purple palette, and I don't care for all purple palettes. It's not my favorite color to reach for, so that's why it's ranking so low. But if it was just like another color story, just like a bunch of different colors, this would definitely rank way higher. Now, what I do love this palette is that this doesn't look like it's purple. It looks like purple to me. It is the color shimmer shadow called Spiritual. Is it a holographic? I think it's a holographic. Yeah, definitely. So I love this shadow because it doesn't look like it's purple. I put it on my lids and it looks green, and I freaking love that. So I have, to me, a all purple palette with a pop of green, and I am here for it. I'm screaming for it. So that's why I really like this palette, is because there's a pop of green in here, and I just don't like purples in general. But the Natasha Denona Rocha palette came out and everyone was losing their freaking minds over it, and then this palette, Bella Beauty Bar, was like, hey, this palette's back in stock, and I was like, alright, I'm gonna get it because I want the Rocha palette. But I did not buy a single Natasha Denona palette this year. Not a single one. I'm kind of proud of myself for that. Yeah. I'm proud of myself for that. I didn't buy a single Natasha Denona palette. Look at me go. So I bought this palette over Rocha because everyone was like, oh my gosh, it's a purple Natasha Denona. But they were like, it's more pink, it's more red. I was like, if you're going to do purple, just do purple. And Bella Beauty Bar just did it better. I haven't tried the Rocha palette, but I can already tell you that Deandra Nicole did it better. This palette I wanted to rank towards the very bottom because I am salty. I was so salty against this palette, but I had to rank it where it was because it's a really good palette. It's really good. This is the Cosmic Beauty Cosmic Brushes. I have no idea what does it say on the palette. Does it even say the brand name on the palette? I have no idea. But it's a Cool Trolls palette. And I wanted to hate on this palette because everyone's like, oh my gosh, Cosmic Beauty is like a baller on a budget palette. Their makeup is so affordable. It's still like $40, which for indie, that is affordable. But for the average consumer, is $40 affordable for a palette? And then I'm in the US. This is a UK brand. If you live in the EU, if you live in the UK, definitely this is a baller on a budget because you don't have to pay a stupid amount for shipping and you're not impatient. You don't have to wait forever to get this palette. This palette took a month to me. And by the time I got it, I was like, can I just get a refund because I don't want this palette anymore. So I was really salty about it because I'm really freaking impatient. But I was also looking at like more Cosmic Brushes palettes this weekend. I was like, should I pick up another one? Should I? Maybe. I don't know. I kind of wanted to because I really like this formula. I did one last look with it. I was like, you know what? This is pretty good. My one beef with it is the shade Gravitate because it looks purple. It looks bronze. It's a multi-chrome, but it's a multi-chrome you're going to get in every single palette that has to do like a standard multi-chrome. It's just like, oh, we're going to do a multi-chrome in a palette. Let's just do that. Let's just do that one. And I'm just like, I don't want that one. I did use it on my lids in a final look and it's really pretty, but it doesn't go with the look at all. Not at all. But it's really good. This is a really good palette and I don't like that I feel that way about it because I'm salty. But it's really good. I really want to try more of the palettes. Yeah, this is my only palette from the brand. I bought this one because I was like, oh my goodness, Cool Tones, like perfect color store for me. I've seen a couple other their palettes and I'm like, is this the perfect color store for me? I don't know. Technically I'm not a no buy this month, but I might just be like, it's a no buy except for eyeshadow palettes. And it's replacement only because I need to buy a new brow pencil. I literally just need to go to Target to buy a $3 eyeshadow pencil. And more eggnog. My brother said the other day that he doesn't think that he's known anyone else that loves eggnog as much as I do. And yes, it's true. I freaking love eggnog. So that has nothing to do with this video. Anyways, Cool Trolls is a great palette. It's a phenomenal palette. I don't think it's baller on a budget by any means. And if you're impatient as hell as I am, I don't know if it's worth it. But if you're in the EU, if you're in the EU or UK, I would more recommend this palette for you than if you live in the US, if you're as impatient as I am. Let's talk about the next palette, which is my last palette from Adept, which is the Adept Amy Loves palette. And this is ranking high because I love the packaging, I love the formula. Now, the mattes in here are so much better than the other two Adept palettes that I was talking about. Now, a lot of arguments can be made, is that these mattes, except for the pop of blue, look almost exactly the same in the eyes. Now, on Amy, they look different. So I can see where she's coming from. But on me and on a lot of different people, they all look the same. But the shimmers in here are so good. The one that's... Whew, almost dropped everything. Oh no. So my favorite shadow in the palette, which also scares me the most, is the shade Glam right here, because that stains like a mofo. It stains. And I was like, why? Because it's so pretty. It's like literally the prettiest shade in this palette, except for lavender. I love lavender, this multi-chrome. It's like a cotton candy multi-chrome, like pink, the purple, the blue. I love a cotton candy multi-chrome. So I'm definitely going to reach for this palette again for this cotton candy moment. But it's really good. Like, I would recommend, it's ranked higher over Cyborg Choir and Element 115 because this is a solid Adept palette. I really hope that their palettes have gotten better with their mattes, but I can't help because because that was the last one and that was in May, so I have no idea how they've gotten better. And Adept is also a brand where it's like, do I buy every single release? But I'm like, oh, I don't like the mattes. But it's like, do I buy every single release? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm kind of waiting for their next color story that like screams my name, and then I'll jump the gun and say like, I'll give the mattes another shot. Next palette is the Harvest of Souls. I never changed the video, but I have videos for the majority of these palettes. Some palettes I don't have videos on, but the majority of these palettes I do have like 2-3 looks on. So just go to my eyeshadow palettes playlist for some cringe, some recent content. You can check out multiple looks, but I did call this palette the Heart of Souls. I called it the Heart of Souls palette the entirety of that video. It is the Harvest of Souls. Harvest of Souls. This is a really good palette. If you like Fantasy Cosmetica, if you like this formula, jump the gun and get it. It's so good. It's so good. But another complaint is this red shade right here. And that final look, I used that all in the crease, all in the outer corner. The staining was so bad. The staining was so bad. It was so bad. But it's so good. I wanted to mention this earlier, but I don't think that Fantasy Cosmetica is a beginner-friendly brand. Unless you want to buy like just a lot of their singles and just do one and done eyeshadow looks, I don't think overall they are a beginner-friendly brand because their shadows are pigmented. Pigmented. And because they're so pigmented, they can be a little challenging to blend. So I would say if you're new to Fantasy Cosmetica, if you're new to makeup, if you're so new to makeup, I would maybe go like the Adept round area for mattes. You know, Cosmic Beauty has some good easy mattes. You know, ColourPop, Blend Bunny, but Fantasy Cosmetica, I would wait on this until you're better at makeup because these mattes are really hard to work with unless you know what you're doing. Also, you have to not be afraid of staining. Staining is just gonna happen. It's just gonna happen with some shadows, and you have to acknowledge that it's okay. It's fine. So don't scare yourself into that, but also know that this is a pretty challenging formula to work with if you're new to eyeshadow. But it's really good, and everything about Fantasy Cosmetica I love, even though like so many palettes are ranking at the bottom. So first stack done. Let's move on to the next stack. He is ice cold at this point. Alright, let me show you this next stack. It's nowhere near as big. I don't know why the first stack was so tall. This is where it got really hard. That first stack, I was like, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm feeling. This stack stuff got hard. So first on this stack is the Ensley Rain Flourish palette. I adore this palette. It is so bright, so vibrant, and they have like these two deep shadows, but like who cares about that when the rest of this is so good. It's ranking high, but it's not ranking super high, is because you have these two chunky shadows, which I like, but not a lot of people do. I wish there was some more like oomph to like the yellow, or wait, which one is the shimmer yellow? Yeah, I wish there was a little bit more oomph to this yellow. I wish this looks blue. It's like green on the eyes, and the eye look, it's definitely green, but also fluffed up, so. But this is a beautiful, bright, colorful palette. This is not everyone's cup of tea. This is ranking high because Ensley Rain, it has a very easy formula. I would recommend, so with these chunky shadows, like definitely don't use a brush. Use your fingers. Also use a glitter primer. So it's a little finicky for that, but the mattes are so good. If you want a bright, colorful palette, I will even go so far. So I don't have this palette. I literally just have this dot, but the Odin's Eye Planet Spirit palette with Baddie Bean that came out last year. If you missed out on that palette, maybe consider picking up this palette because it's not the same. It's not a dupe, but it has similar vibes, and I love this palette. This is a palette where I want to use a bunch of shadows. Like, I used so many shadows when I created that look with this because I just didn't want to stop using it. I just kept wanting to use more and more. It just made me so incredibly happy, and this palette makes me so incredibly happy. So, but for me, I like a palette that I feel okay with using year round. But for me, this palette just screams too much of spring summer, where it's like, yes, I can use it whenever I want, but at the same time, it's just like, I just feel like more of a spring summer vibe with this. So it's kind of ranking where it is. This next palette is, I was debating, because I didn't do a video with this palette. I was debating including this in an honorable mention, but like, no, I wanted to use it in here. I didn't even do the honorable mention, and I'm not going to do it now. We're 30 minutes into this video, but it's the Clionadh singles I bought off Mercari, and my brain was like, my low buy initially was like, if I buy more than 4 single eyeshadows, I'm going to count it as a palette. I almost did eye swatches of all of these shadows, and then I realized I didn't want to do that to my eyes, so I never did a video with these. This big shadow in the middle is from Give Me Glow. It is the shade Electric Unicorn. So I think this shadow was a freebie because I don't remember. I don't remember seeing that with the other 8 Clionadh shadows. Clionahd's good. It's real good, y'all. Now, the reason why it's ranking like kind of in this middle area is because I didn't pick out these shadows. A lot of the shadows that are in here I would have purchased myself if I was making my own choices, but there's just like a few golds in here that I'm never really gonna reach for. But I love this blue, I love this orangey pink down here. This like green brown multi-chrome is so good. I understand why people like Clionadh because of this palette. I get it, and I'm so happy I tried them. Easy one and done eyeshadow looks. Gonna keep this on my vanity as a resource for when I just want a one and done eyeshadow look. And I feel like that a lot lately. This palette's ranking high because it's so cute, and it is the last palette that I reviewed on my channel. It is the Happy Go Lucky palette from Ensley Green. So I posted on Instagram. Follow me on Instagram at TrinityMay9391. It's always listed in my description box, my Instagram handle. Follow me on Instagram because it's not so much about the makeup looks that I post. It's more so about the cat photos, and it's more so about the captions. I like to think of myself as posting funny captions on Instagram. So come for the makeup looks, but stay for the cats and stay for the captions. That's what I'm saying. So I originally tagged Bella Beauté Bar in this palette, on this palette picture. And they commented, I was like, oh my gosh, Ensley Rain commented. And then they were like, no, this is Ensley Rain. And I was like, I'm so freaking stupid. So I'm never getting on Bella Beauté Bar PRless because I tagged the wrong freaking brand. I did edit the post and made Ensley Rain, so I messed up. But this is the cutest palette of 2024. It's the cutest. The reason why it's ranking high is because of the packaging. I love this one and done eyeshadow look you can get with it. Cottontail is kind of a throwaway shade for me, but at the same time I understand its use because I have the e.l.f. Lock It Down eyeshadow primer, and if you don't set that primer with a powder, you're gonna get creasing. And so if I'm using that eyeshadow palette or primer, if I'm using this palette, Cottontail comes very much in handy. It's my skin tone, so I don't find a use for it really. But if I generally, when it comes to eyeshadow primers, I have 2 and I use whichever one I grab first. So if I want to feel like I'm using this palette and I use the e.l.f., grab the e.l.f. primer first, then obviously Cottontail is good. This is just an adorable little palette. I loved both looks. I loved all 3 looks I did with this palette. It's so good. It makes me want to buy the Fox palette. It makes me want to buy whatever palette they're coming out this month because they're doing these cutie little animal palettes for the foreseeable future. I have no idea. They haven't even teased the next one, which just makes me like, are you doing it? Are you stopping? Because I want more of these little 6-band palettes. They're so cute. The next palette is a big boy. It's a big boy palette, which is why we are in the top 7 now. Top 7. Top 7. It is my first Ensley Rain palette, the Lands of Enchantment palette. It is the size of my head. It's a big boy. And I love it. I did not know Pale left behind this palette in my reviews because that was going to take far too long. It's so good, y'all. This is another palette that's just like, yes, I could do a one-and-done eyeshadow look. Yes, I want to do a one-and-done eyeshadow look, but there's too much pretty shadows in here. There's too many. I want to use all of them, and they make me so, so happy. This is a phenomenal palette. It's like $88.88. I don't know where the 88 cents came from, but it's expensive. And I love it. I think this is really worth the money for as big it is how many shades you get. I really do think it's worth it. And if you want cold girl, if you want pastels, if you want a little bit of a grungy pastel moment, you can do that with this palette. And it is so, so good. So what is my favorite brand of the year? It's probably Ensley Rain. My favorite brand that I've tried, because I bought a lot of Ensley Rain this year. I think Ensley Rain overall is my favorite brand of the year. But is it number 1? Stay tuned. Next palette, I'm only ranking lows because it's discontinued. And call me a hypocrite because I also think my number 1 palette of the year is discontinued. I'm going to press pause at some point and look that up. So this palette is ranking low because it's discontinued. This is Bella Beauté Bar. Bella Beauté Bar. Angles of Illumination. I know this palette is discontinued and it breaks my heart. This is an all shimmer palette. This is not for everybody. It's for me because I love one and done eyeshadow looks, but this is not for everybody. You have beautiful blues, but really what calls out to me in this palette is this bottom row because you have this peach and rose gold, and I love that sort of vibe. I love that sort of style of eyeshadows. So like I went on a weekend trip to Salt Lake City and I brought these 3 shadows, boom, 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 and I created the most pretty peachy rose gold look. I loved it so much. So I really don't use these top 2 rows, honestly. I don't use the majority of this palette, which is also why it's kind of ranking relatively low. It was because it's discontinued, and also because I don't reach for like half the palette. I look at the bottom row and I'm like, this is all I want to use. But overall, this is so good. Bella Beauté Bar, why'd you discontinue this? It breaks my heart. It makes me so sad. It makes me so sad. Alright, next is the Ensley Rain Flutter palette. Packaging. Ensley Rain just does it with packaging. I understand it's AI packaging. I don't care. I think it's the cutest shit ever. The reason why this is ranking higher than Flourish is because to me this is more of a year-round palette. Some days I want to do a more grungy look, but you have this pop of green, this pop of like creamsicle orange. I want to say this is a murky yellow. It looks olive green. I don't know how to describe that shade, but it's beautiful. This just makes me happier than Flourish. It just does. It makes me happier than Lands of Enchantment. And that's sort of like what sets apart the rest of these palettes. Which of these palettes makes me the happiest? Because besides DD Signature, really none of these palettes are a dud. Really none of them. So I just have to go off of how I feel in my gut. And this palette just makes me feel happiest in my gut. So I had to include this pretty dang high. And then the shocker, this is the shocker for me, because for the majority of this year, I thought this was going to be number 1, and then I laid out all of my eyeshadow palettes, and I was like, no, it's not number 1. It's not. It's a Fancy Cosmetica Cradled and Ice palette. For, like, up until, like, yesterday, I thought this was going to be number 1. And then I realized I couldn't. This is an easier Fancy Cosmetica formula. It's easier, but it's still very pigmented. It's still very wabam. This yellow, for being so light, does work on me, which is why I really enjoy it. You have so many one and done eyeshadow looks with this palette. It's absolutely absurd. The one shimmer in here I don't care for, which is Embrace, just because it's a little bit on the darker side. It's a little bit on the darker side. But you have pretty duochromes, you have pretty chunky, you have pretty one and dones. This is just an overall, all around great palette. But it's only number 4. Let's talk about my number 3. Y'all, this surprised me too. So, coming in at number 3 is the Ensley Rain Underland palette. I had to rank this over Cradled in Ice because it makes me happier. It gives me stronger, happier vibes. Just does. And so this is like the only Halloween palette I have in my collection. It's like the only one. It's grungy. The reason why I enjoy this palette so much is that I have the idea to take my dark red lip liner and turn it into an eyeliner, and I felt so fierce, so confident, so in control, so unbelievably ready to start my day with a red waterline. It's because of the eyeliner, and it's because of this palette that caused me to have that thought, and I freaking adore this palette. The matte white, hello, give me a matte white. This is the only matte white is coming to. I should have used it today, but I decided against it. If you need a matte white, here you freaking go. This is grungy, this is murky, this is confident. This is confident in an eyeshadow palette. It makes me so incredibly happy. Which leads me to the Unearthly Not Normal Remastered palette. So, I did this look recently, trying a new medication, in the 3 looks palette video. My vision was so bad, I should not have been doing makeup that morning. But after reviewing the footage, I was like, yeah, it looks pretty bad. But then I got compliments on that eyeshadow look, and I was like, cool, I couldn't see anything that morning. I could not see anything. So I got compliments on that look, even though it was so blurry and so bad. The reason why this is ranking number 2 is because the color story is different. It's not normal. It's grungy. It keeps me in my comfort zone, and I will say that my comfort zone is greens. And so I did my final look with green palette. I'm not a purple person, but with these greens, this murky, whatever the hell you want to call this shadow, I'm never going to use topaz again, but it had to rank number 2 because of how I feel and how confident I felt when I used this palette. It screams confidence, it screams powerful, it screams weird, and I love it, and I love the feeling that this palette gives me. So that's why it's number 2. But number 1 surprised you, it surprised me. But it's the only thing that made sense. And it's the palette on my eyes. This palette I'm pretty sure is discontinued. Actually, press pause, we're gonna look this up. Ha! It's still available. Okay, I'm not a hypocrite. Ha! I've been filming this for far too long. So it is still available. It is expensive. Unearthly is so expensive. And so I answered the question in the Unearthly Not Normal palette video, is it worth the money? And I kind of don't think it is. But at the same time, I'm ranking it number 2. And so obviously I think it's worth the money. So I'm kind of a hypocrite when I say that. But number 1, I'm surprised you. Surprised me. It's the Unearthly Spring Magic palette. Yes, it has to be. I did one last look today because I was like, is it really my number 1 palette of the year? And yes, it is. Let me open it. This is me in a palette. I love blues. I love greens. If I want neutrals, I'm going for these cool tone murky shadows. But my favorite kind of look to do is a blushy cold girl makeup look. And I get that with this palette. This is the only palette this year that I've tried that I can get my cold girl make. You can argue Cradle in Ice, you can do that, you can make that argument, but for me, this is like, if I can only keep one palette in my collection, literally, it would probably be this palette, because I wear green every single day for work. Hopefully that's changing. If I get the job, it will be changing, and then I won't know what to do, because The dress code for that discipline is white. And I'm not going to do white eyeshadow every single day for work. I do whatever color I want for work, but my brain is like, at least once a week you have to do green eyeshadow. And I'm not going to do white eyeshadow once a week for work. But you have this beautiful matte white. You have this beautiful Looks White Blue Duochrome shimmer topper. I don't have words for how much I love this palette, so let's talk about what's on my eyes. I use the shade Flourish. Hey, throwback Tinsley Rain. I use the shade Flourish in the crease and the lower lash line. That's all I did. My brain was like, you should go into the shade Blossom. I was like, you know what? I really don't want that dark depth into it. I really don't. I want to keep it light. I want to keep it fresh. I then went into the shade Warmth, like the majority of my lids. And I was like, you know what? That's so pretty. Let's do a little bit more. And I went in with the shade Sunshine right here. And that's all I did today. That's literally it. And I love it so much. I love this palette. It has to be #1. The look I did for, like, just to make sure, I used the blues and greens, and it was beautiful. It was absolutely freaking beautiful. I'm going to keep this palette on my vanity because I need to do a taupey look with this palette again. I have to. This palette makes me so happy. This is everything I need in an eyeshadow palette. Everything. All the different eyeshadow looks, my comfort zone eyeshadow looks is in this palette. Now, it's $78. And that makes me cringe because it's like, there's no holographic shades in here. You have a multi-chrome and the shade Mystic, but it's kind of like that standard multi-chrome that if you're going to put a like in the Culturals palette, how I said that if you're going to have a multi-chrome in a palette, it's going to be like that brown to bronze to red to purple kind of multi-chrome. That's what you get in this palette, so that's not my favorite. That's the one thing I had to critique on. But the mattes are easy. They're blendable. They're pigmented. But they're easy. And if you're gonna spend $78 on a palette, they better be easy. And these are. I just knew it, like, when I laid down all of my palettes, I was like, it has to be Spring Magic. It does. And I regret nothing. I regret absolutely nothing. Did I think that Unearthly was gonna take over the top 2 spots of this ranking? I had no idea. Until I literally sat down yesterday, I was like, you know what, is Unearthly going to take 1 and 2? And I was like, yes, they have to. So, we did it. Trin is going to hate me so much for this, all of these pictures and swatches and clips I have to include. She's going to hate me so much, but we did it. This is all the palettes I tried in 2024. This is all of them ranked. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Are you surprised by my #1? I'm surprised by my #1. What was your favorite palette of 2024? Let me know, because maybe it's only buy 1 or 2 eyeshadow palettes at the end of this year. Just maybe buy 1 more. Maybe buy 2 more eyeshadow palettes by the end of this year. And maybe I'll just, can I survive with no buy of no eyeshadow palettes? Can I survive it? It's like the 6th of December. And I'm like, yeah, it's literally December 6th. And I'm like, I'm 6 days into my no buy. And I'm like, do I buy an eyeshadow palette? It can wait. Because if I do buy another eyeshadow palette this year, it's going to show up in 2025 years ranking. So that's the way it's going to go. I want to thank y'all so much for watching. I appreciate you so much. So much. If you like these videos, if you like eyeshadow palette content, if you like rambling and going off topic, stay tuned for more content from me. As always, have joy and bye.